Introduction to Business, 2nd edition, an OpenStax textbook. Read along with the full text at openstax.org. This audiobook was produced by Open Audio. Listen for free on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or on our website at openaudio.us.
Chapter 7. Designing Organizational Structures. Introduction.
Learning Outcomes. After reading this chapter, you should be able to answer these questions. 1. What are the traditional forms of organizational structure? 2. What contemporary organizational structures are companies using? 3. Why are companies using team-based organizational structures? 4. What tools do companies use to establish relationships within their organizations? 5. How can the degree of centralization, decentralization, be altered to make an organization more successful? 6. How do mechanistic and organic organizations differ? 7. How does the informal organization affect the performance of the company? 8. What trends are influencing the way businesses organize?
Exploring Business Careers. Elise Eberwin, EVP of People and Communications, American Airlines. As Executive Vice President of People and Communications at American Airlines, Elise Eberwin's role within the structure of the organization might not be readily apparent. After all, you might ask, doesn't corporate communications typically involve marketing? And what does that have to do with organizational structure? As it turns out, quite a bit at the world's largest airline. When American Airlines and U.S. Airways finally got the U.S. government's approval to merge in late 2013, it was no longer business as usual for Eberwin and her colleagues at the new airline. Until the merger, which basically produced the world's largest airline with more than 6,000 daily flights and over 100,000 employees, Eberwin was head of communications at U.S. Airways, a position she held for 9 years after various other jobs in the airline industry. Communications and aviation are in Eberwin's DNA. She worked as a flight attendant at TWA before moving on to manage communications at Denver-based Frontier Airlines. Her next communications experience was at America West, which then merged with U.S. Airways, where Eberwin served as Executive Vice President of People, Communications, and Public Affairs before she took over the Chief Communications job at American Airlines, which she held until retiring from the role in 2022. Corporation communications is no longer just about marketing. The importance of an effective communication strategy cannot be understated in today's 24/7 business environment. Corporate communication executives have taken on an expanded role in many organizations. According to data, more chief communications officers are reporting directly to the CEO, an increase of 34% over previous years. In addition, key leadership skills for communications professionals include having a strategic mindset that goes beyond day-to-day communications, to include a vision for the future that can be translated into achievable corporate strategies at all levels of the organization. In a company as large as American Airlines, even after the initial 2-year integration plan, there are many departments, unions, and other employees to communicate with on a daily basis, not to mention the millions of customers they serve every day. For example, American's communications team focuses on social media and engagement, customer service, and social insights. The customer service group operates around the clock to address customers' issues, including missed flight connections and lost luggage, as well as quirky questions like why certain airplanes have a specific number of stripes on their tails. Reporting to Eberwin, the social media group was empowered to reach out to any company department directly to get answers for any customer. Eberwin believed her role included working closely with the CEO and other managers across the globe to provide consistent, detailed information to all of its stakeholders. To accomplish this feat, Eberwin and other senior managers held a weekly Monday morning meeting to review the previous week's operations data, revenue results, and people engagement activities. Eberwin believes this type of regular contact with colleagues across the organization helps reinforce Americans' commitment to engagement and transparent communications, which ultimately shapes the customer's experience as well as the entire company.
This module focuses on the different types of organizational structure, the reasons an organization might prefer one structure over another, and how the choice of an organizational structure ultimately can impact that organization's success. In today's dynamic business environment, organizational structures need to be designed so that the organization can quickly respond to new competitive threats and changing customer needs. Future success for companies will depend on their ability to be flexible and respond to the needs of customers. In this chapter, we'll look first at how companies build organizational structures by implementing traditional, contemporary, and team-based models. Then, we'll explore how managers establish the relationships within the structures they have designed, including determining lines of communication, authority, and power. Finally, we'll examine what managers need to consider when designing organizational structures and the trends that are changing the choices companies make about organizational design.
Seven point one: Building organizational structures. Learning objective: what are the traditional forms of organizational structure?
The key functions that managers perform include planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. This module focuses specifically on the organizing function. Organizing involves coordinating and allocating a firm's resources so that the firm can carry out its plans and achieve its goals. This organizing, or structuring process, is accomplished by determining work activities and dividing up tasks, division of labor, grouping jobs and employees, departmentalization, assigning authority and responsibilities, delegation. The result of the organizing process is a formal structure within an organization. An organization is the order and design of relationships within a company or firm. It consists of two or more people working together with a common objective and clarity of purpose. Formal organizations also have well-defined lines of authority, channels for information flow, and means of control. Human, material, financial, and information resources are deliberately connected to form the business organization. Some connections are long-lasting, such as the links among people in the finance or marketing department. Others can be changed at almost any time. For example, when a committee is formed to study a problem, every organization has some kind of underlying structure. Typically, organizations base their frameworks on traditional, contemporary, or team-based approaches. Traditional structures are more rigid and group employees by function, products, processes, customers, or regions. Contemporary and team-based structures are more flexible and assemble employees to respond quickly to dynamic business environments. Regardless of the structural framework a company chooses to implement, all managers must first consider what kind of work needs to be done within the firm. Division of labor. The process of dividing work into separate jobs and assigning tasks to workers is called division of labor. In a fast food restaurant, for example, some employees take or fill orders, others prepare food, a few clean and maintain equipment, and at least one supervises all the others. In an auto assembly plant, some workers install rearview mirrors, while others mount bumpers on bumper brackets. The degree to which the tasks are subdivided into smaller jobs is called specialization. Employees who work at highly specialized jobs, such as assembly line workers, perform a limited number and variety of tasks. Employees who become specialists at one task or a small number of tasks develop greater skill in doing that particular job. This can lead to greater efficiency and consistency in production and other work activities. However, a high degree of specialization can also result in employees who are disinterested or bored due to the lack of variety and challenge. Traditional structures. After a company divides the work it needs to do into specific jobs, managers then group the jobs together so that similar or associated tasks and activities can be coordinated. This grouping of people, tasks, and resources into organizational units is called departmentalization. It facilitates the planning, leading, and control processes. An organization chart is a visual representation of the structured relationships among tasks and the people given the authority to do those tasks. In the organization chart in Exhibit 7.4, each figure represents a job, and each job includes several tasks. The sales manager, for instance, must hire salespeople, establish sales territories, motivate and train the salespeople, and control sales operations. The chart also indicates the general type of work done in each position. As Exhibit 7.5 shows, 5 basic types of departmentalization are commonly used in organizations. 1. Functional departmentalization, which is based on the primary functions performed within an organizational unit: marketing, finance, production, sales, and so on. Ethan Allen Interiors, a vertically integrated home furnishings company that designs, manufactures, and retails furniture and accessories, continues its successful departmentalization by function, including retail, manufacturing, and sourcing, product design, logistics, and operations, which includes tight financial controls. 2. Product departmentalization, which is based on the goods or services produced or sold by the organizational unit, such as outpatient/emergency services, pediatrics, cardiology, and orthopedics. For example, ITT is a diversified leading manufacturer of highly engineered components and customized technology solutions for the transportation, industrial, and oil and gas markets. The company is organized into 4 product divisions: industrial process, pumps, valves, and wastewater treatment equipment; control technologies, motion control and vibration isolation products; motion technologies, shock absorbers, brake pads, and friction materials; and interconnect solutions, connectors for a variety of markets. 3. Process departmentalization, which is based on the production process used by the organizational unit, such as lumber cutting and treatment, furniture finishing, and shipping. For example, the organization of Chevron, a major oil company, reflects the activities the company needs to perform to extract oil from the ground and turn it into a final product: exploration and research, production, drilling, refining, and marketing and distribution. Pixar, the animated movie company, now part of Disney, is divided into 3 parallel yet interactive process-based groups: technology development, which delivers computer graphics tools; creative development, which creates stories and characters and animates them; and production, which coordinates the filmmaking process. 4. Customer departmentalization, which is based on the primary type of customer served by the organizational unit, such as wholesale or retail purchasers. The PNC Financial Services Group is a diversified financial institution offering a broad range of retail, commercial, corporate, and asset management services to individuals, businesses, and institutions. It is structured by the type of consumer it serves: retail banking for consumers; the asset management group with specific focus on individuals as well as corporations, unions, municipalities, and others; and corporate and institutional banking for middle market companies nationwide. 5. Geographic departmentalization, which is based on the geographic segmentation of organizational units, such as US and Canadian marketing, European marketing, and Latin American marketing. People are assigned to a particular organizational unit because they perform similar or related tasks, or because they are jointly responsible for a product, client, or market. Decisions about how to departmentalize affect the way management assigns authority, distributes resources, rewards performance, and sets up lines of communication. Many large organizations use several types of departmentalization. For example, Procter & Gamble, P&G, the multi-billion-dollar consumer products company, integrates 4 different types of departmentalization, which the company refers to as 4 pillars. First, the Global Business Units, GBU, divide the company according to products: baby, feminine, and family care; beauty, fabric, and home care; and health and grooming. Then, P&G uses a geographical approach. creating business units to market its products around the world. There are selling and market operations (SMO) groups for North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia Pacific, Greater China, and India, the Middle East, and Africa. P&G's third pillar is Global Business Services Division, GBS, which also uses geographic departmentalization. GBS provides technology processes and standard data tools to enable the GBUs and SMOs to better understand the business and to serve consumers and customers better. It supports P&G business units in areas such as accounting and financial reporting, information technology, purchases, payroll and benefits administration, and facilities management. Finally, the divisions of the corporate functions pillar provide a safety net to all the other pillars. These divisions are comprised of functional specialties, such as customer business development, external relations, human resources, legal, marketing, consumer and market knowledge, research and development, and workplace services.
Ethics in practice. Panera's menu comes clean. Making a strategic change to a company's overall philosophy and the way it does business affects every part of the organizational structure. And when that change pertains to sustainability and clean food, Panera took on the challenge more than a decade ago. Panera Bread's U.S. food menu is marketed as 100% clean, free from artificial preservatives, sweeteners, flavors, and colors from artificial sources based on the company's published no-no list. In 2015, Ron Scheich, founder and now former CEO, announced Panera's no-no list of nearly 100 ingredients, which he vowed would be eliminated or never used again in menu items. 2 years later, the company announced that its menu was 100% clean, but the process was not an easy one. Panera used thousands of labor hours to review the 450 ingredients used in menu items, eventually reformulating more than 120 of them to eliminate artificial ingredients. Once the team identified the ingredients that were not clean, they worked with the company's 300 vendors, and in some instances, a vendor supplier, to reformulate an ingredient to make it preservative-free. For example, the recipe for the company's popular broccoli cheddar soup had to be revised 60 times to remove artificial ingredients without losing the soup's taste and texture. According to Scheich, the trial-and-error approach was about finding the right balance of milk, cream, and emulsifiers, like Dijon mustard, to replace sodium phosphate, a no-no item. While keeping the soup's texture creamy, Panera also created a new cheddar cheese to use in the soup and used a Dijon mustard that contained unpreserved vinegar as a substitute for the banned sodium phosphate. Sarah Burnett, former VP of Food Belief Sustainability and PR at Panera, now Executive Director of Refed, believes that the company's responsibility goes beyond just serving its customers. She believes that Panera can make a difference by using its voice and purchasing power to have a positive impact on the overall food system. In addition, the company's Herculean effort to remove artificial ingredients from its menu items also helped it take a close look at its supply chain and other processes that Panera could simplify by using better ingredients. Panera is not yet satisfied with its commitment to clean food. Panera has committed to sourcing 100% cage-free eggs across its U.S. operations and reports steady progress toward achieving that goal by the end of 2025. Critical thinking questions. 1. How does Panera's approach to clean eating provide the company with a competitive advantage? 2. What kind of impact does this commitment to preservative-free food have on the company's organizational structure? 3. Does clean food put additional pressure on Panera and its vendors? Explain your reasoning.
Line and staff organization. The line organization is designed with direct, clear lines of authority and communication flowing from the top managers downward. Managers have direct control over all activities, including administrative duties. An organization chart for this type of structure would show that all positions in the firm are directly connected via an imaginary line extending from the highest position in the organization to the lowest, where production of goods and services takes place. This structure, with its simple design and broad managerial control, is often well suited to small entrepreneurial firms. As an organization grows and becomes more complex, the line organization can be enhanced by adding staff positions to the design. Staff positions provide specialized advisory and support services to line managers in the line and staff organization, shown in Exhibit 7.6. In daily operations, individuals in line positions are directly involved in the processes used to create goods and services. Individuals in staff positions provide the administrative and support services that line employees need to achieve the firm's goals. Line positions in organizations are typically in areas such as production, marketing, and finance. Staff positions are found in areas such as legal counseling, managerial consulting, public relations, and human resource management.
Concept check. 1. How does specialization lead to greater efficiency and consistency in production? 2. What are the 5 types of departmentalization?
Seven point two. Contemporary structures. Learning objectives. What contemporary organizational structures are companies using?
Although traditional forms of organizational structures are still utilized by companies to structure their businesses, more flexible structures have emerged in response to changes in the workplace. Let's look at matrix and committee structures and how those two types of organizations are helping companies better leverage the diverse skills of their employees. Matrix structure. The matrix structure, also called the project management approach, is sometimes used in conjunction with the traditional line and staff structure in an organization. Essentially, this structure combines two different forms of departmentalization, functional and product, that have complementary strengths and weaknesses. The matrix structure brings together people from different functional areas of the organization, such as manufacturing, finance, and marketing, to work on a special project. Each employee has two direct supervisors, the line manager from her or his specific functional area, and the project manager. Exhibit 7.7 shows a matrix organization with 4 special project groups, A, B, C, and D, each with its own project manager. Because of the dual chain of command, the matrix structure presents some unique challenges for both managers and subordinates.
Exhibit 7.7. Matrix organization. This exhibit provides a visual illustration representing the matrix structure of organization. To understand the matrix structure, imagine a company chart not as a simple tree, but as a grid. At the top, you have the traditional vertical hierarchy, a president overseeing various vice presidents of functional departments like research, sales, and engineering. But then, the structure shifts. Cutting horizontally across those departments are project managers, each leading their own special project group. If you visualize those lines crossing, you're looking at the core of this structure's success and its biggest challenge, the dual chain of command. In this setup, a specialist, like an engineer, doesn't just answer to the vice president of engineering, they also report to their specific project manager. This design is meant to boost teamwork and flexibility, but it's easy to see why it can also lead to power struggles or confusion over who is actually in charge.
Advantages of the matrix structure include teamwork. By pooling the skills and abilities of various specialists, the company can increase creativity and innovation and tackle more complex tasks. Efficient use of resources. Project managers use only the specialized staff they need to get the job done, instead of building large groups of underused personnel. Flexibility. The project structure is flexible and can adapt quickly to changes in the environment. The group can be disbanded quickly when it is no longer needed. Ability to balance conflicting objectives. The customer wants a quality product and predictable costs. The organization wants high profits and the development of technical capability for the future. These competing goals serve as a focal point for directing activities and overcoming conflict. The marketing representative can represent the customer, the finance representative can advocate high profits, and the engineers can push for technical capabilities. Higher performance. Employees working on special project teams may experience increased feelings of ownership, commitment, and motivation. Opportunities for personal and professional development. The project structure gives individuals the opportunity to develop and strengthen technical and interpersonal skills. Disadvantages of the matrix structure include power struggles. Functional and product managers may have different goals and management styles. Confusion among team members. Reporting relationships and job responsibilities may be unclear. Lack of cohesiveness. Team members from different functional areas may have difficulty communicating effectively and working together as a team. Although project-based matrix organizations can improve a company's flexibility and teamwork, some companies are trying to unravel complex matrix structures that create limited accountability and complicate day-to-day operations. Matrix structures can foster collaboration and encourage employees to develop new skills. However, the structure has been criticized because decision-making can take longer and employee performance can be difficult to measure. Committee structure. In committee structure, authority and responsibility are held by a group rather than an individual. Committees are typically part of a larger line and staff organization. Often, the committee's role is only advisory, but in some situations, the committee has the power to make and implement decisions. Committees can make the coordination of tasks in the organization much easier. For example, Novartis, the huge Swiss pharmaceutical company, has a committee structure, which is chosen by and reports to the board of directors. The company's executive committee is responsible for overseeing the business operations of group companies within the global organization and consists of the CEO, CFO, the Chief People and Organization Officer, the Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, presidents of the U.S. and international operations, and a Chief Medical Officer. Committees bring diverse viewpoints to a problem and expand the range of possible solutions. But there are some drawbacks. Committees can be slow to reach a decision and are sometimes dominated by a single individual. It is also more difficult to hold any one individual accountable for a decision made by a group. Committee meetings can sometimes go on for long periods of time, with seemingly little being accomplished.
Concept check. 1. Why does the matrix structure have a dual chain of command? 2. How does a matrix structure increase power struggles or reduce accountability? 3. What are advantages of a committee structure? Disadvantages?
7.3 Using teams to enhance motivation and performance. Learning objective. Why are companies using team-based organizational structures?
One of the most apparent trends in business today is the use of teams to accomplish organizational goals. Using a team-based structure can increase individual and group motivation and performance. This section gives a brief overview of group behavior, defines work teams as specific types of groups, and provides suggestions for creating high-performing teams. Understanding group behavior. Teams are a specific type of organizational group. Every organization contains groups, social units of 2 or more people who share the same goals and cooperate to achieve those goals. Understanding some fundamental concepts related to group behavior and group processes provides a good foundation for understanding concepts about work teams. Groups can be formal or informal in nature. Formal groups are designated and sanctioned by the organization. Their behavior is directed toward accomplishing organizational goals. Informal groups are based on social relationships and are not determined or sanctioned by the organization. Formal organizational groups, like the sales department at Spectrum, must operate within the larger Spectrum organizational system. To some degree, elements of the larger Spectrum system, such as organizational strategy, company policies and procedures, available resources, and the highly motivated employee corporate culture, determine the behavior of smaller groups, such as the sales department, within the company. Other factors that affect the behavior of organizational groups are individual member characteristics, for example, ability, training, and personality, the roles and norms of group members, and the size and cohesiveness of the group. Norms are the implicit behavioral guidelines of the group, or the standards for acceptable and unacceptable behavior. For example, sales managers at Spectrum might be expected to work weekends as part of their job responsibilities. This may not be listed as a formal job requirement, but it is the expected norm in the organization. Group cohesiveness refers to the degree to which group members want to stay in the group and tend to resist outside influences, such as a change in company policies. When group performance norms are high, group cohesiveness will have a positive impact on productivity. Cohesiveness tends to increase when the size of the group is small, individual and group goals are similar, the group has high status in the organization. Rewards are group-based rather than individual-based, and the group competes with other groups within the organization. Workgroup cohesiveness can benefit the organization in several ways, including increased productivity, enhanced worker self-image because of group success, increased company loyalty, reduced employee turnover, and reduced absenteeism. Zillow is known for its workgroup cohesiveness. On the other hand, cohesiveness can also lead to restricted output, resistance to change, and conflict with other workgroups in the organization. The opportunity to turn the decision-making process over to a group with diverse skills and abilities is one of the arguments for using workgroups and teams in organizational settings. For group decision-making to be most effective, however, both managers and group members must understand its strengths and weaknesses. Workgroups versus work teams. We have already noted that teams are a special type of organizational group, but we also need to differentiate between work groups and work teams. Work groups share resources and coordinate efforts to help members better perform their individual duties and responsibilities. The performance of the group can be evaluated by adding up the contributions of the individual group members. Work teams require not only coordination, but also collaboration, the pooling of knowledge, skills, abilities, and resources in a collective effort to attain a common goal. A work team creates synergy, causing the performance of the team as a whole to be greater than the sum of team members' individual contributions. Simply assigning employees to groups and labeling them a team does not guarantee a positive outcome. Managers and team members must be committed to creating, developing, and maintaining high-performance work teams. Factors that contribute to their success are discussed later in this section.
Table 7.1. Strengths and weaknesses of group decision-making. The strengths of group decision-making include: groups bring more information and knowledge to the decision-making process. Groups offer a diversity of perspectives and therefore generate a greater number of creative solutions to problems. Group decision-making results in a higher quality decision than does individual decision-making. Participation of group members increases the likelihood that a decision will be accepted. The weaknesses of group decision-making include: groups typically take a longer time to reach a solution than an individual takes. Group members may pressure others to conform, reducing the likelihood of alternatives. The process may be dominated by one or a small number of participants. Groups lack accountability because it is difficult to assign responsibility for outcomes to any one individual.
Types of teams. The evolution of the team concept in organizations can be seen in three basic types of work teams: problem-solving, self-managed, and cross-functional. Problem-solving teams are typically made up of employees from the same department or area of expertise and from the same level of the organizational hierarchy. They meet on a regular basis to share information and discuss ways to improve processes and procedures in specific functional areas. Problem-solving teams generate ideas and alternatives and may recommend a specific course of action, but they typically do not make final decisions, allocate resources, or implement change. Many organizations that experienced success using problem-solving teams were willing to expand the team concept to allow team members greater responsibility in making decisions, implementing solutions, and monitoring outcomes. These highly autonomous groups are called self-managed work teams. They manage themselves without any formal supervision, taking responsibility for setting goals, planning and scheduling work activities, selecting team members, and evaluating team performance. Today, an overwhelming majority of companies use self-managed teams in some capacity. One example is Zappos' shift to self-managed work teams in 2014, where the traditional organizational structure was revised into a system called holacracy. Since the initial implementation, some managers have been put in place, but the company still largely embraces the concept. Job descriptions are focused on work duties and accountability rather than tasks tied to a specific title. Employees hold multiple roles, and the teams, called circles, act like small businesses governing themselves. Another innovation from the company came when 3 employees invented Elixir guitar strings and used their spare time outside of work hours with a handful of other colleagues to improve the original design. After working 3 years entirely on their own, without asking for any supervisory or top management permission or being subjected to any kind of oversight, the team finally sought the support of the larger company, which they needed to take the strings to market. W.L. Gore's Elixir strings, introduced in the late 1990s, grew into a major player in the acoustic guitar string market and are widely used by both amateur and professional musicians. An adaptation of the team concept is called a cross-functional team. These teams are made up of employees from about the same hierarchical level, but different functional areas of the organization. Many task forces, organizational committees, and project teams are cross-functional. Often the team members work together only until they solve a given problem or complete a specific project. Cross-functional teams allow people with various levels and areas of expertise to pool their resources, develop new ideas, solve problems, and coordinate complex projects. Both problem-solving teams and self-managed teams may also be cross-functional teams.
Customer satisfaction and quality. Team approach flies high at GE Aerospace. Teaming is the term used at GE Aerospace manufacturing plants to describe how self-managed groups of employees are working together to make decisions to help them do their work efficiently, maintain quality, and meet critical deadlines in the global aviation supply chain. This management concept is not new to GE Aerospace. The self-managed teaming model, pioneered at GE's Bromont, Quebec, and Durham, North Carolina, plants has been expanded across many of GE Aerospace's manufacturing sites worldwide and remains central to its supply chain culture. The goal of teaming is to move decision-making and authority as close to the end product as possible, which means frontline employees are accountable for meeting performance goals on a daily basis. For example, if there is some sort of delay in the manufacturing process, it is up to the team to figure out how to keep things moving, even if that means skipping breaks or changing their work schedules to overcome obstacles. Under the self-managed teams model, employees at the manufacturing plants do not have supervisors that provide the direction for their work. Instead, they have coaches that give them specific goals, and they determine how to reach those goals within their teams. The typical functions performed by supervisors, such as planning, monitoring progress, and managing overtime and vacations, are managed by the teams themselves. In addition, members from each team work with management and HR representatives to provide input on decisions that impact overall plant operations, such as hiring and downsizing decisions, and when to cut back on overtime hours. This hands-on approach helps workers gain confidence and motivation to fix problems directly, rather than sending a question up the chain of command and waiting for a directive. In addition, teaming allows the people who do the work on a daily basis to come up with the best ideas to resolve issues and perform various jobs tasks in the most efficient way possible. For GE Aerospace, implementing the teaming approach has been a successful venture, and the company finds the strategy easiest to implement when starting up a new manufacturing facility. In the mid-2010s, GE's aviation and power businesses opened several new plants, including a multimodal Brilliant factory in Welland, Ontario, Canada. That facility's hiring process, designed around GE's self-managed teaming concept, was notably more rigorous and team-oriented than typical manufacturing hiring practices at the time. With the team concept in mind, job candidates need to demonstrate not only required technical skills, but also soft skills. For example, the ability to communicate clearly, accept feedback, and participate in discussions in a respectful manner. Critical thinking questions. 1. What challenges do you think HR recruiters face when hiring job candidates who need to have both technical and soft skills? 2. How can experienced team members help new employees be successful in the teaming structure? Provide some examples.
Building high-performance teams. A great team must possess certain characteristics, so selecting the appropriate employees for the team is vital. Employees who are more willing to work together to accomplish a common goal should be selected, rather than employees who are more interested in their own personal achievement. Team members should also possess a variety of skills. Diverse skills strengthen the overall effectiveness of the team, so teams should consciously recruit members to fill gaps in the collective skill set. To be effective, teams must also have clearly defined goals. Vague or unclear goals will not provide the necessary direction or allow employees to measure their performance against expectations. Next, high-performing teams need to practice good communication. Team members need to communicate messages and give appropriate feedback that seeks to correct any misunderstandings. Feedback should also be detached. That is, team members should be careful to critique ideas rather than criticize the person who suggests them. Nothing can degrade the effectiveness of a team like personal attacks. Lastly, great teams have great leaders. Skilled team leaders divide work so that tasks are not repeated, help members set and track goals, monitor their team's performance, communicate openly, and remain flexible to adapt to changing goals or management demands.
Concept check. 1. What is the difference between a work team and a work group? 2. Identify and describe 3 types of work teams. 3. What are some ways to build a high-performance team?
Seven point four. Authority. Establishing organizational relationships. Learning objective. What tools do companies use to establish relationships within their organizations?
Once companies choose a method of departmentalization, they must then establish the relationships within that structure. In other words, the company must decide how many layers of management it needs and who will report to whom. The company must also decide how much control to invest in each of its managers and where in the organization decisions will be made and implemented. Managerial hierarchy. Managerial hierarchy, also called the management pyramid, is defined by the levels of management within an organization. Generally, the management structure has 3 levels: top, middle, and supervisory management. In a managerial hierarchy, each organizational unit is controlled and supervised by a manager in a higher unit. The person with the most formal authority is at the top of the hierarchy. The higher a manager, the more power they have. Thus, the amount of power decreases as you move down the management pyramid. At the same time, the number of employees increases as you move down the hierarchy. Not all companies today are using this traditional configuration. One company that has eliminated hierarchy altogether is the Morningstar Company, the largest tomato processor in the world. Based in Woodland, California, the company employs 600 permanent colleagues and an additional 4,000 workers during harvest season. Founder and sole owner Chris Rufer started the company and based its vision on the philosophy of self-management, in which professionals initiate communication and coordination of their activities with colleagues, customers, suppliers, and others, and take personal responsibility for helping the company achieve its corporate goals. An organization with a well-defined hierarchy has a clear chain of command, which is the line of authority that extends from one level of the organization to the next, from top to bottom, and makes clear who reports to whom. The chain of command is shown in the organization chart and can be traced from the CEO all the way down to the employees producing goods and services. Under the unity of command principle, everyone reports to and gets instructions from only one boss. Unity of command guarantees that everyone will have a direct supervisor and will not be taking orders from a number of different supervisors. Unity of command and chain of command give everyone in the organization clear directions and help coordinate people doing different jobs. Matrix organizations automatically violate the unity of command principle because employees report to more than one boss, if only for the duration of a project. For example, consider Unilever plc, the consumer products company that makes Dove soap, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and Hellmann's mayonnaise. For many years, Unilever operated with a complex regional product matrix, with powerful regional leaders in North America and Europe, alongside global product heads. Employees in divisions that spanned both regions often experienced confusion about whose priorities took precedence, a common problem in matrix structures. In 2022, Unilever simplified its organization into 5 global product-based business groups: beauty and well-being, personal care, home care, nutrition, and ice cream, shifting toward a product divisional structure. Companies like Unilever tend to abandon matrix structures because of problems associated with unclear or duplicate reporting relationships. In other words, with a lack of unity of command. Individuals who are part of the chain of command have authority over other persons in the organization. Authority is legitimate power granted by the organization and acknowledged by employees that allows an individual to request action and expect compliance. Exercising authority means making decisions and seeing that they are carried out. Most managers delegate or assign some degree of authority and responsibility to others below them in the chain of command. The delegation of authority makes the employees accountable to their supervisor. Accountability means responsibility for outcomes. Typically, authority and responsibility move downward through the organization as managers assign activities to and share decision-making with their subordinates. Accountability moves upward in the organization, as managers in each successively higher level are held accountable for the actions of their subordinates. Span of control. Each firm must decide how many managers are needed at each level of the management hierarchy to effectively supervise the work performed within organizational units. A manager's span of control, also called span of management or span of supervision, is the number of employees the manager has the ability to supervise or control. The number of employees can depend on several factors, such as the size of the organization, the industry, or even the experience level of the manager. In general, the larger the span of control, the more efficient the organization. As Table 7.2 shows, however, both narrow and wide spans of control have benefits and drawbacks.
Table 7.2. Narrow and wide spans of control. This table discusses both narrow span of control and wide span of control, focusing on the advantages and disadvantages of each. We begin with the narrow span of control. Advantages of a narrow span of control include the following. This approach allows a high degree of control. Fewer subordinates may mean the manager is more familiar with each individual. Close supervision can provide immediate feedback. The disadvantages of a narrow span of control include more levels of management mean that it is more expensive. Decision-making is slower due to vertical layers. Top management are isolated. This approach discourages employee autonomy. We now move our focus to a wide span of control. Advantages of a wide span of control include the following. Fewer levels of management means increased efficiency and reduced costs. Increased subordinate autonomy leads to quicker decision-making. This approach allows for greater organizational flexibility. This approach creates higher levels of job satisfaction due to employee empowerment. The disadvantages of a narrow span of control include: this approach allows for less control. Managers may lack familiarity with their subordinates due to the large number. Managers can be spread so thin that they can't provide necessary leadership or support. There may be a lack of coordination or synchronization.
If hundreds of employees perform the same job, one supervisor may be able to manage a very large number of employees. Such might be the case at a shipping warehouse, where many employees perform similar tasks routinely. But if employees perform complex and dissimilar tasks, a manager can effectively supervise only a much smaller number. For instance, a supervisor in the research and development area of a pharmaceutical company might oversee just a few research chemists due to the highly complex nature of their jobs.
Concept check. 1. How does the chain of command clarify reporting relationships? 2. What is the role of a staff position in a line and staff organization? 3. What factors determine the optimal span of control?
Seven point five. Degree of centralization. Learning objective. How can the degree of centralization and decentralization be altered to make an organization more successful?
The optimal span of control is determined by the following 5 factors. 1. Nature of the task. The more complex the task, the narrower the span of control. 2. Location of the workers. The more locations, the narrower the span of control. 3. Ability of the manager to delegate responsibility. The greater the ability to delegate, the wider the span of control. 4. Amount of interaction and feedback between the workers and the manager. The more feedback and interaction required, the narrower the span of control. 5. Level of skill and motivation of the workers. The higher the skill level and motivation, the wider the span of control. The final component in building an effective organizational structure is deciding at what level in the organization decisions should be made. Centralization is the degree to which formal authority is concentrated in one area or level of the organization. In a highly centralized structure, top management makes most of the key decisions in the organization, with very little input from lower-level employees. Centralization lets top managers develop a broad view of operations and exercise tight financial controls. It can also help to reduce costs by eliminating redundancy in the organization. But centralization may also mean that lower-level personnel don't get a chance to develop their decision-making and leadership skills, and that the organization is less able to respond quickly to customer demands. Decentralization is the process of pushing decision-making authority down the organizational hierarchy, giving lower-level personnel more responsibility and power to make and implement decisions. Benefits of decentralization can include quicker decision-making, increased levels of innovation and creativity, greater organizational flexibility, faster development of lower-level managers, and increased levels of job satisfaction and employee commitment. But decentralization can also be risky. If lower-level personnel don't have the necessary skills and training to perform effectively, they may make costly mistakes. Additionally, decentralization may increase the likelihood of inefficient lines of communication, competing objectives, and duplication of effort. Several factors must be considered when deciding how much decision-making authority to delegate throughout the organization. These factors include the size of the organization, the speed of change in its environment, managers' willingness to give up authority, employees' willingness to accept more authority, and the organization's geographic dispersion. Decentralization is usually desirable when the following conditions are met. The organization is very large, like Unilever, Costco, or Bank of America. The firm is in a dynamic environment where quick, local decisions must be made, as in many high-tech industries. Managers are willing to share power with their subordinates. Employees are willing and able to take more responsibility. The company is spread out geographically, such as Hilton Hotels and Resorts, Coca-Cola, or Samsung. As organizations grow and change, they continually reevaluate their structure to determine whether it is helping the company to achieve its goals.
Concept check. 1. What are the characteristics of a centralized organization? 2. What are the benefits of a decentralized organization? 3. What factors should be considered when choosing the degree of centralization?
7.6 Organizational Design Considerations. Learning Objective. How do mechanistic and organic organizations differ?
You are now familiar with the different ways to structure an organization, but as a manager, how do you decide which design will work the best for your business? What works for one company may not work for another. In this section, we'll look at two generic models of organizational design and briefly examine a set of contingency factors that favors each. Mechanistic versus organic structures. Structural design generally follows one of the two basic models described in Table 7.3, mechanistic or organic. A mechanistic organization is characterized by a relatively high degree of job specialization, rigid departmentalization, many layers of management, particularly middle management, narrow spans of control, centralized decision-making, and a long chain of command. This combination of elements results in what is called a tall organizational structure. Hospital and government organizations are typical mechanistic organizations. In contrast, an organic organization is characterized by a relatively low degree of job specialization, loose departmentalization, few levels of management, wide spans of control, decentralized decision-making, and a short chain of command. This combination of elements results in what is called a flat organizational structure. Colleges and universities tend to have flat organizational structures, with only 2 or 3 levels of administration between the faculty and the president. Exhibit 7.9 shows examples of flat and tall organizational structures. Factors influencing the choice between mechanistic and organic structures. Although few organizations are purely mechanistic or purely organic, most organizations tend more toward one type or the other. The decision to create a more mechanistic or a more organic structural design is based on factors such as the firm's overall strategy, the size of the organization, and the stability of its external environment, among others. A company's organizational structure should enable it to achieve its goals. And because setting corporate goals is part of a firm's overall strategy-making process, it follows that a company's structure depends on its strategy. That alignment can be challenging for struggling companies trying to accomplish multiple goals. For example, a company with an innovation strategy will need the flexibility and fluid movement of information that an organic organization provides. But a company using a cost control strategy will require the efficiency and tight control of a mechanistic organization. Often, struggling companies try to simultaneously increase innovation and rein in costs, which can be organizational challenges for managers. Such is the case at Microsoft, where CEO Satya Nadella cut more than 18,000 jobs in 2014 after taking the helm at the technology giant. Most of the cuts were the result of the company's failed acquisition of a mobile phone business. The company eliminated additional jobs in sales and marketing, mostly overseas, as Microsoft shifts from a software developer to a cloud computing software delivery service. At the same time, Nadella also encourages employees and managers to break down barriers between divisions and increase the pace of innovation across the organization.
Table 7.3 Mechanistic versus organic structure. This table compares and contrasts the structural characteristics of two forms of organizational structures, mechanistic structures and organic structures. We begin by exploring mechanistic structures. Mechanistic structures feature high job specialization, rigid departmentalization, tall managerial hierarchy with many levels of management, a narrow span of control, centralized decision-making authority, and a long chain of command. Next, we will focus on organic structures. Organic structures feature low job specialization, loose departmentalization, flat managerial hierarchy with few levels of management, a wide span of control, decentralized decision-making authority, and a short chain of command.
Exhibit 7.9. Flat versus tall organizational structures. When we examine how companies structure their leadership, we often compare flat versus tall organizational designs. This exhibit provides a visual illustration of each, beginning with a flat structure and then moving on to a tall structure. A flat structure, which features a wide span of control, is lean and direct. You can visualize this as a single sales manager overseeing a broad, horizontal team of salespeople all at once. It's a design that promotes speed and simplicity. In contrast, a tall structure utilizes a narrow span of control and builds a much deeper hierarchy. Here, the president sits at the top, but the chain of command is elongated with multiple levels of middle management, directors, then regional managers, and finally local managers, before you even reach the individual salespeople at the base. While this adds layers, it provides a much more granular approach to management and supervision.
Size is another factor that affects how mechanistic or organic a company's organizational structure is. Much research has been conducted that shows a company's size has a significant impact on its organizational structure. Smaller companies tend to follow the more organic model, in part because they can. It's much easier to be successful with decentralized decision-making, for example, if you have only 50 employees. A company with that few employees is also more likely, by virtue of its size, to have a lesser degree of employee specialization. That's because when there are fewer people to do the work, those people tend to know more about the entire process. As a company grows, it becomes more mechanistic, as systems are put in place to manage the greater number of employees. Procedures, rules, and regulations replace flexibility, innovation, and independence. That isn't always the case, however. W.L. Gore and Associates is a global materials science company with over 10,000 employees and roughly $4 to $5 billion in annual revenue. But, as noted earlier, uses an organic organizational structure. Employees self-manage, participate on teams, and the organizational structure evolves organically as employees create roles for themselves to fill functional gaps within the company. Lastly, the business in which a company operates has a significant impact on its organizational structure. In complex, dynamic, and unstable environments, companies need to organize for flexibility and agility. For example, companies in technology or creative industries such as marketing agencies need the flexibility to foster innovative thinking and to evolve to meet the needs of their clients. That is, their organizational structures need to respond to rapid and unexpected changes in the business environment. For companies operating in stable environments, however, the demands for flexibility and agility are not so great. The environment is predictable. In a simple, stable environment, therefore, companies benefit from the efficiencies created by a mechanistic organizational structure.
Managing change. Google learns the alphabet. In the late 1990s, Larry Page and Sergey Brin built a search engine that used links to determine the importance of individual pages on the web. Today, Google has grown from 2 founders to more than 180,000 employees in dozens of different countries. While the company is routinely high on the lists of best places to work and companies with the best employee perks, its meteoric growth has not been without challenges. Much has been written about Google's informal organizational structure, which has fueled a creative environment second to none. At one point, the founders shared an office that looked like a college dorm room, complete with skateboards, beanbag chairs, and remote-controlled airplanes. The company's offices around the world are designed to be the most productive workspaces imaginable. Sometimes, with meeting rooms designed as camping vans in Amsterdam, or hallways decorated with subway grates and fire hydrants in New York City. As this creative environment expanded, Google relied on its innovative and competitive culture to produce some of the most popular products around the world, including YouTube, Android, Pixel, and the Google Workplace suite of programs, including Gmail, Sheets, and Google Docs. As Google grew, so did the strain on its informal structure. In the early days, while adding employees on a daily basis, the company needed to find the right balance between maintaining creativity and running a rapidly growing organization. In 2001, Brin and Page hired an outside CEO, Eric Schmidt, who left the company in 2020 to pursue other ventures, who hired an HR manager and then divided employees into teams based on product or function. This structure seemed to work well until Google started to acquire companies or develop new products to add to its portfolio of business ventures, including DoubleClick and Nest. At the same time, Page and Brin never lost sight of their moonshot projects, potentially revolutionary innovations that could change lives which may or may not become a profitable venture. In 2015, as part of Google's reorganization into Alphabet, Sundar Pichai, who had successfully led Google Search and other product areas, became the new CEO of Google, while co-founder Larry Page became CEO of the new parent company, Alphabet, and Sergey Brin became its president, with former Google CEO Eric Schmidt serving as Alphabet's executive chair. In 2019, Page and Brin stepped down from their executive roles, and Sundar Pichai became CEO of Alphabet as well as Google. In 2015, Alphabet hired Ruth Porat as its new CFO, now president and chief investment officer. She has received praise for her guidance in helping company executives take a closer look at costs, while still encouraging the innovation and creativity the Google founders seemingly invented. Although organizational change is not always easy, the new structure streamlined processes while allowing the various businesses room to grow on their own. Critical thinking questions. 1. If you were a longtime Googler, how would you feel about the change in organizational structure at the company? 2. Do you think the creative work environment fostered by company founders has taken a hit with the new Alphabet organizational structure? Why or why not? 3. What are some advantages and disadvantages of creating separate businesses for the company's moonshot projects?
Concept check. 1. Compare and contrast mechanistic and organic organizations. 2. What factors determine whether an organization should be mechanistic or organic?
Seven point seven. The Informal Organization. Learning objective. How does the informal organization affect the performance of the company?
Up to this point, we have focused on formal organizational structures that can be seen in the boxes and lines of the organization chart. Yet many important relationships within an organization do not show up on an organization chart. Nevertheless, these relationships can affect the decisions and performance of employees at all levels of the organization. The network of connections and channels of communication based on the informal relationships of individuals inside the organization is known as the informal organization. Informal relationships can be between people at the same hierarchical level or between people at different levels and in different departments. Some connections are work-related, such as those formed among people who carpool or ride the same train to work. Others are based on non-work commonalities, such as belonging to the same community center or health club, or having children who attend the same school. Functions of the informal organization. The informal organization has several important functions. First, it provides a source of friendships and social contact for organization members. Second, the interpersonal relationships and informal groups help employees feel better informed about and connected with what is going on in their firm, thus giving them some sense of control over their work environment. Third, the informal organization can provide status and recognition that the formal organization cannot or will not provide employees. Fourth, the network of relationships can aid the socialization of new employees by informally passing along rules, responsibilities, basic objectives, and job expectations. Finally, the organizational grapevine helps employees to be more aware of what is happening in their workplace by transmitting information quickly and conveying it to places that the formal system does not reach. Informal communication channels. The informal channels of communication used by the informal organization are often referred to as the grapevine or the rumor mill. Managers need to pay attention to the grapevines in their organization. because their employees increasingly put a great deal of stock in the information that travels along it, especially in this era of social media. Research shows that many employees believe statements heard through the grapevine. This channel of communication is an important part of social connection in the workplace. Data also show that as much as 75% of the information channeled through the grapevine is at least in part true. The grapevine may not be wholly accurate, but it is a very reliable indicator that something is going on, said one survey respondent. With this in mind, managers need to learn to use the existing informal organization as a tool that can potentially benefit the formal organization. An excellent way of putting the informal organization to work for the good of the company is to bring informal leaders into the decision-making process. That way, at least the people who use and nurture the grapevine will have more accurate information to send it.
Concept check. 1. What is the informal organization? 2. How can informal channels of communication be used to improve operational efficiency?
Seven 7.8 Trends in organizational structure. Learning objective. What trends are influencing the way businesses organize?
To improve organizational performance and achieve long-term objectives, some organizations seek to re-engineer their business processes or adopt new technologies that open up a variety of organizational design options, such as virtual corporations and virtual teams. Other trends that have strong footholds in today's organizations include outsourcing and managing global businesses. Re-engineering organizational structure. Periodically, all businesses must re-evaluate the way they do business. This includes assessing the effectiveness of the organizational structure to meet the formidable challenges of the future. Companies are increasingly turning to re-engineering the complete redesign of business structures and processes in order to improve operations. An even simpler definition of re-engineering is starting over. In effect, top management asks, if we were a new company, how would we run this place? The purpose of re-engineering is to identify and abandon the outdated rules and fundamental assumptions that guide current business operations. Every company has many formal and informal rules based on assumptions about technology, people, and organizational goals that no longer hold. Thus, the goal of re-engineering is to redesign business processes to achieve improvements in cost control, product quality, customer service, and speed. The re-engineering process should result in a more efficient and effective organizational structure that is better suited to the current and future competitive climate of the industry. The virtual corporation. One of the biggest challenges for companies today is adapting to the technological changes that are affecting all industries. Organizations are struggling to find new organizational structures that will help them transform information technology into a competitive advantage. One alternative that gained momentum during the COVID-19 pandemic is the virtual corporation, which utilizes a network of independent companies, suppliers, customers, and even competitors, linked through technology to share skills, costs, and access to markets. This network structure allows companies to come together quickly to exploit rapidly changing opportunities. The key attributes of a virtual corporation are: technology. Information technology helps geographically distant companies form alliances and work together. Opportunism. Alliances are less permanent, less formal, and more opportunistic than in traditional partnerships. Excellence. Each partner brings its core competencies to the alliance, so it is possible to create an organization with higher quality in every functional area and increase competitive advantage. Trust. The network structure makes companies more reliant on each other and forces them to strengthen relationships with partners. No borders. This structure expands the traditional boundaries of an organization. In the concept's purest form, Each company that links up with others to create a virtual corporation is stripped to its essence. Ideally, the virtual corporation has neither a central office nor an organization chart, no hierarchy, and no vertical integration. It contributes to an alliance only its core competencies or key capabilities. It mixes and matches what it does best with the core competencies of other companies and entrepreneurs. For example, a manufacturer would only manufacture while relying on a product design firm to decide what to make, and a marketing company to sell the end result. Although the preponderance of firms that are purely virtual can vary by geographic location and industry, many companies embrace some characteristics of the virtual structure. One example is Cisco Systems. Cisco uses many manufacturing plants to produce its products, but these plants are owned and operated by independent contract manufacturers. Cisco now relies on contract manufacturers for virtually all of its manufacturing needs. To the average customer, the interdependency of Cisco's suppliers and inventory systems makes it look like one huge, seamless company. Virtual teams. Technology is also enabling corporations to create virtual work teams. Geography is no longer a limitation when employees are considered for a work team. Virtual teams mean reduced travel time and costs, reduced relocation expenses, and utilization of specialized talent regardless of an employee's location. When managers need to staff a project, all they need to do is make a list of required skills and a general list of employees who possess those skills. When the pool of employees is known, the manager simply chooses the best mix of people and creates the virtual team. Special challenges of virtual teams include keeping team members focused, motivated, and communicating positively despite their locations. If feasible, at least one face-to-face meeting during the early stages of team formation will help with these potential problems. Outsourcing. Another organizational trend that continues to influence today's managers is outsourcing. For decades, companies have outsourced various functions. For example, payroll functions such as recording hours, managing benefits and wage rates, and issuing paychecks have been handled for years by third-party providers. Outsourcing can include a wide array of business functions, including customer service, production efforts, engineering, information technology, and marketing. Historically, companies have outsourced for two main reasons: cost reduction and to focus on the core strengths of the business instead of functions that do not align. Outsourcing is a key component of many businesses' operations across all functions in the organization. Some of the insights highlighted in Deloitte's recent global outsourcing survey bear this out. According to survey respondents from 280 global organizations, outsourcing continues to be successful because it is adapting to changing business environments. Outsourcing is prevalent for functions such as customer service, cybersecurity, and IT. Other functions such as purchasing, R&D, and finance functions are also being outsourced. Businesses view outsourcing as a way to manage costs, but also to enhance innovation to maintain a competitive advantage. Another form of outsourcing has become prevalent over the last several years, in part as the result of the slow economic recovery from the Great Recession in the early 2000s and the COVID-19 pandemic. As many U.S. businesses hesitated to hire full-time workers, even as they began to experience gradual growth, some companies began to offer contract work to freelancers who are not considered full-time employees with benefits. Known as the gig economy, this approach has advantages and disadvantages. Some individuals like the independence the gig economy offers, while others take on multiple projects when they are unable to find full-time employment with a company, especially during economic downturns, as was the case during the COVID-19 pandemic. Still others, as full-time employees, may take on side projects as freelancers to pursue a hobby or passion, or simply to supplement their income. Estimates suggest that the gig economy will grow to nearly $500 million in gross volume and is expected to impact 1/3 of U.S. workers, with over 60 million individuals now freelancing. Despite the challenges, outsourcing programs can be effective. To be successful in outsourcing efforts, managers must do the following: identify a specific business problem Consider all possible solutions. Decide whether outsourcing the work is the appropriate answer to the problem. Develop a strategic outsourcing partnership with vendors and a solid framework that promotes seamless collaboration and communication. Engage with outsourcing partners on a regular basis to instill trust between the two entities. Remain flexible when it comes to working with outsourcing providers in terms of accommodating requests or adjusting needs when necessary in an effort to build a long-term strategic partnership beneficial to both parties. Structuring for global mergers. Mergers creating mega firms, such as Microsoft and LinkedIn, Amazon and Whole Foods, and Verizon and Yahoo, raise some important questions regarding corporate structure. How can managers hope to organize the global pieces of these huge, complex new firms into a cohesive, successful whole? Should decision-making be centralized or decentralized? Should the firm be organized around geographic markets or product lines? And how can managers consolidate distinctly different corporate cultures? These issues and many more must be resolved if mergers of global companies are to succeed. Beyond designing a new organizational structure, one of the most difficult challenges when merging two large companies is uniting the cultures and creating a single business. The merger between Pfizer and Pharmacia, makers of Rogaine and Advil, is no exception. Failure to effectively merge cultures can have serious effects on organizational efficiency. As part of its strategic plan for the giant merger, Pfizer put together 14 groups that would make recommendations concerning finances, human resources, operation support, capital improvements, warehousing, logistics, quality control, and information technology. An outside consultant was hired to facilitate the process. One of the first tasks for the groups was to deal with the conqueror, Pfizer, versus conquered Pharmacia attitudes. Company executives wanted to make sure all employees knew that their ideas were valuable and that senior management was listening. As more and more global mergers take place, sometimes between the most unlikely suitors, companies must ensure that the integration plan includes strategies for dealing with cultural differences. Establishing a logical leadership structure, implementing a strong two-way communications channel at all levels of the organization, and redefining the new organization's vision, mission, values, and culture.
Concept check. 1. How does technology enable firms to organize as virtual corporations? 2. What effect could the gig economy have on a company's decision to outsource? 3. What are some organizational issues that must be addressed when two firms merge?
Preparing for tomorrow's workplace skills. 1. When people talk of climbing the corporate ladder, they are referring to moving vertically upward through the organizational structure. Many employees plot career paths that will take them to increasingly higher levels of management. Do you think you would be more interested in climbing higher in an organization, or being a middle management bridge between the employees who do the work and the executives who set the strategy? Explain the reasons for your choice. 2. Teams are an increasingly popular method of organizing corporations, but not all people are suited for teamwork. As a manager, what do you do with employees who are talented but unapproachable? Can you think of a way to involve people who are uncomfortable in team settings so that your teams have the perspective of these employees as well? 3. Think about how gossip and rumors travel through a grapevine. Draw as many grapevines as you can think of that reflect the different ways rumors move through an organization. Can you think of information that a manager would want to disseminate through the grapevine? Is there information that is inappropriate to disseminate through informal channels? Provide examples. 4. Do you think companies that outsource will inevitably become virtual corporations? Why or why not? 5. It used to be that only high-level executives and CEOs were able to work out of the office. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, work-from-home options have trickled down the organizational chart. Some positions remain remote even after pandemic concerns have subsided. In your opinion, Is there a point in the organizational structure at which working remotely, at home or on the road, should stop? Should all employees in the hierarchy be allowed to work in a virtual environment, or should there be limits? Explain your reasoning. 6. Team activity. Have you ever worked on a team with an underperforming member, such as a slacker, a complainer, or a critic? Assemble a team of 3 to 5 students and brainstorm a list of bad team members you have experience working with. Once you have a list of types, discuss how that person affected the work of the team and the outcome the team produced. Brainstorm ways to better manage and mitigate the negative effects of bad team members. Share your results with the class.
Ethics activity. Training IT replacements. The University of California at San Francisco, UCSF, laid off more than 80 IT workers, a mix of full-time and contract employees, to outsource their operations to India in 2017. This change was part of a larger plan by UCSF to increase its technology outsourcing, which was projected to save the organization more than $30 million over time. A large part of UCSF's IT work focuses on its hospital services, and many other healthcare facilities had already outsourced these types of back-end jobs to foreign countries. Working through a multinational contractor to manage the outsourcing process, UCSF also asked workers who would soon be out of a job to train their overseas replacements via video conferencing calls to India. One such worker remarked, "I'm speechless. How can they do this to us?" A UCSF spokesperson explained that the organization provides millions of dollars in charity care for low-income individuals, and that to continue providing those services, the school had to focus on more specialized tech work related to patients and medical research and send other IT work overseas. UCSF is not alone in sending IT jobs overseas and making the laid-off workers train their Indian replacements. Companies such as American Express and United Health Group have outsourced IT operations abroad. Using a web search tool, locate articles about this topic and then write responses to the following questions. Be sure to support your arguments and cite your sources. Ethical dilemma. Are UCSF and other companies justified in outsourcing technology jobs to India? Do they have any obligation to find other jobs or provide training for displaced workers? Should organizations ask employees who are being laid off to train their replacements?
Critical thinking case. Gore's flat structure works well. Imagine an organization with more than 12,000 employees working in countries around the world, with no hierarchy structure. W. L. Gore and Associates, headquartered in Newark, Delaware, is a model of unusual business practices. Wilbert Gore, who left DuPont to explore new uses for Teflon, started the company in 1958. Best known for its breathable, weatherproof Gore-Tex fabric, Glide dental floss, and Elixir guitar strings, the company has no bosses, no titles, no departments, and no formal job descriptions. There is no managerial hierarchy at Gore, and top management treats employees, called associates, as peers. In 2005, the company named 22-year associate Terry Kelly as its new chief executive officer. Unlike large public corporations, Gore's announcement was made without much fanfare. Kelly served as CEO for 13 years until her retirement in 2018, when Jason Field succeeded her. The company focuses on its products and company values rather than on individuals. Committees, comprised of employees, make major decisions such as hiring, firing, and compensation. They even set top executives' compensation. Employees work on teams which are switched around every few years. In fact, all employees are expected to make minor decisions instead of relying on the boss to make them. We're committed to how we get things done, Kelly says. That puts a tremendous burden on leaders because it's easier to say, just do it, than to explain the rationale. But in the long run, you'll get much better results because people are making a commitment. Because no formal lines of authority exist, Employees can speak to anyone in the company at any time. This arrangement also forces employees to spend considerable time developing relationships. As one employee described it, instead of trying to please just one boss, you have to please everyone. Several years ago, the company underwent a strategy refresh, conducting surveys and discussions with employees about how they fit into the organization's culture. Not surprisingly, there was a cultural divide based on multiple generations of workers and length of service stature, which Kelly and her associates have worked hard to overcome. She realizes that not everyone will become a lifer at Gore, but recognizes the importance of younger employees who have helped the company become more tech-savvy in communications and stay well-connected in a fast-moving business world. The informal organizational structure continues to work well. With revenues of $4 to $5 billion, the company produces thousands of advanced technology products for the electronics, industrial, fabrics, and medical markets. Its corporate structure fosters innovation and has been a significant contributor to associate satisfaction. Employee turnover is lower, and the company has a steady stream of applicants to choose from. In 2017, Gore was named one of the 12 legends on Fortune's 100 best companies to work for. The company continues to be listed on the best rankings since the list began in 1998. Critical thinking questions. 1. Given the lack of formal structure, how important do you think Gore's informal structure becomes? 2. Is W.L. Gore a mechanistic or an organic organization? Support your answer with examples from the case. 3. How do you think Gore's flat organizational structure affects innovation at the company? This has been Introduction to Business, 2nd edition, from OpenStax. OpenStax textbooks and this free audiobook are covered under a Creative Commons license. The full text is available at www.openstax.org. You can find this free audiobook anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Instructors can even download a course shell to easily embed these recordings in Canvas courses. Learn more by visiting www.openaudio.us. Did you find this audiobook helpful? If so, please let us know by leaving a comment and sharing this recording with a colleague or a friend.